Welcome to episode number 6 on the basics of medicine. Last time I showed you what the medical landscape looks like in a reductionistic fashion. Today I'm talking about some of the major flaws in the first steps of medicine, which are medical research and medical development. Remember, I'm looking for flaws to try and explain or try to understand why modern medicine is failing, as we saw in previous episodes. My name is Davide Patti, and I am a scientist and I work as an independent researcher. On the left side, you have the topics that will be covered today. So let's start with the first slide, conflict of interest. I think I alluded to this one in my last presentation. I have again listed here the interests of the different stakeholders in medicine. So I think it's clear that citizens want effective and affordable medicine. Then second, I think it's clear to everyone that companies want to maximize shareholders' profit. Then government want to minimize healthcare costs. Regulatory agencies such as the FDA, the American Food and Drug Administration, wants safe medicine. And medical practitioners, they want to master and excel at what they learned. And like this is observed in many other professions. I also think they have to practice according to regulations, and they want to do good. Then we realize here, especially if we compare the first two motives, that there is a potential conflict of interest. Now, let's look at a hypothetical situation where a patient would meet directly with a representative of the medical industry. Now imagine it's 1850. A simple man presents with a dull pain in his right foot. He feels some pain in his foot. He notices a clinic. He enters and is attended by a merchant that is dressed as a physician. Now the merchant notices his pain and convinces him to buy his new product that reduces pain. So the pain reduces dramatically, almost goes away completely. Now the young man is pretty happy, and so is the merchant. The merchant knows his product reduces pain but doesn't cure the underlying illness. So he knows that the patient will likely have to continue taking the painkillers as long as he feels pain. So he will generate profits. Now, what is the thought processes going on in both the patient and the businessman's head? I think if you want to make money selling healthcare products, you have two main options. You either create a product that restores health to its, or let's say restores your original homeostasis, or a product that improves your life without actually improving the level of homeostasis. So if you don't change the level of homeostasis, the patient will have to continue to use this product because he will never recover a healthy equilibrium. And this can be done by addressing the symptoms. Now, the patient's perspective, as an average patient, or let's say the average patient is not a businessman, is not an entrepreneur, and is probably raised with the impression that modern medicine is effective and is trustworthy. Now, in this framework, the patient probably wants a medicine that is effective and believes that the medical researcher is researching for to give him exactly this, so an effective medicine. So we see here that we have a clear conflict of interest between the patient and the industry. Now, to finish the story from before, the man goes home to his wife and kids, removes his right shoe, and notices a small stone falling out. He realizes that the pain in his foot was likely caused by the small stone. And so it is, the inflammation in his right foot subsides in the few hours after removing the shoe. So the body readjusted to the original homeostasis level. Now, what we observe today is not different, and this is especially relevant for chronic disease where patients have to continue to take drugs indeterminately. Now, what are the consequences for science? Here we see the medical industry and science. In this illustration, this is the illustration from before. It shows the main process presented in the last lesson. And we also see the figure of a hardware disk that contains the scientific knowledge. Today we focus on R&D, research and development, and their influence on science. So we saw who is involved in these steps. We see here funding comes both from the citizens and from the industry. Then research is both performed by public and private institutes, and development is practically completely carried out by the industry. Why is this so? It is because it is the most capital intensive step, and only companies are organized and prepared to take on the risk of doing such an investment. Now, the companies will therefore focus on the research material, as we previously saw, on the research material that has the highest profit potential. This means that they will pick one of the ideas, and from basic research, we see here in the illustration, they pick one science, one research, and they start to produce more and more studies around this one idea. So you see in the development step, there's more research produced around this idea. Now, this means that scientific knowledge will contain research about ideas that are picked by the industry, ideas that can generate profit, not necessarily ideas that are most effective for the patient. Now, there's another consequence on scientific knowledge, which is that profits are maximized by patent protecting the drug, like the product, the drug or the device. So in the pharmaceutical industry, if you want to create a patent, if you want to patent a product, it has to be a extra natural product. So it has to be something which is not in nature. It has to be extra natural. So yes, only these compounds can be patented, which means that research will be about these products that are not existent in nature as it is. Now I've talked about the microscopic effects on science. Now I will give you a few ways how this negative effect takes place on a more microscopical level. Beware that I could do a presentation on each one of these sub bullet points. I won't do that. My goal here is to get to start building medicine from scratch, as I discussed previously, as soon as possible. So it will be this presentation, and the next one will focus on status quo, and afterwards we will get started with discussing the real basics of medicine. So First of all, science is a method, it is a tool we use to try and understand reality. And same as for any other tool, it can be used to do good or to do bad. So let's start. Biased research priorities means that it's when you decide to focus on it's when I decide to focus on my part of reality, the reality I want to see. So how can you do that? You can ignore non-patentable solutions. How is this done? It's done by ignoring non-patentable solutions. It is done on focusing on newer drug to replace older drugs because the patent is expiring. And then you can also decide to dwell on what doesn't work. Then bias study execution, which is deciding to create my own reality. This can be done by asking the wrong questions. It can be done by ignoring important control variables in the study. And it can be done via statistical manipulation, manipulating statistics. Then continuing, biased publishing is deciding to impose my reality on others. This is done taking advantage of information asymmetry, not publishing negative results, and also interpreting the results subjectively. Now, this is something that we all do. We all look after our best interest. It's not, it's something that is hardwired in our biology. Now, do we have actual proof that this is happening? That there is a considerable portion of scientific knowledge that is manipulated for own purposes, say? Now, in research, there's different types of studies of research studies with different quality levels. There are better and worse studies, depending on their type. Now, before the drug reaches the market, the highest quality study is usually considered to be the randomized double-blind placebo-controlled study. So this is what you would see in what study A would be in the illustration. So research produces is done, and it is a randomized double-blind placebo-controlled study, which is considered to be a high-quality study. And then there is higher quality studies in literature. For instance, retrospective studies, which are studies that are done years after the application of the medicine in practice, where the drug results, study results are taken from a large sample of patients that used the drug in practice. Usually, these are done in hospitals. Now, what we find in literature is that sometimes study A and study B do not show the same effectiveness of a drug, and they sometimes also show different mechanisms of action. So I have added here two examples I just took from literature. One for depression, where a class of drug, the selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, have shown in retrospective studies to have the same efficacy as a placebo. Not only that, there are studies that show how the mechanism of action is different, that these drugs do not reach the brain in sufficient amount to induce a to block the serotonin reuptake. Now, another hint that science, this bad science, might be contributing factor to ineffective medicine would come from Dr. Engel. She was the editor-in-chief for 11 years at the New England Journal of Medicine. I have already used this source for this publisher, reference this publisher in previous episodes. It is a prestigious publisher. She quit at one point and said that she was nauseated by the tricks used in research by corporations, especially to push newer drugs to market to replace older drugs where patents were expiring. And she said, what were we expecting when we decided to put the research for our health in the hands of multinational companies? Also, the argument can be made that most published findings are actually false. I encourage you to look up the two sources here. One is a brief documentary by Veritasium on YouTube. It's a it's a short 10-minute video. He's a doctor in physics discussing this topic. And also, I would recommend you to look into the first reference. Now, we see again, I show you again this painting of Picasso in his Cubism period. Again, he tried to show, to use a technique, Cubism, to show the all sides of reality, all views of reality. And as we see, this is difficult. In practice, this oftentimes does not happen. The research oftentimes is biased and is interested in showing only a view of reality. But despite all of this, science remains the best tool we have to understand nature. So we have to accept this as well. Now, in conclusion, there is a conflict of interest in medical research and development. The medical industry is the sole player in the development step, which means they will be acting as a filter in the process. This implies all other steps will consequently be compromised. This is the nature of a process. Then bias of the medical industry will shape the scientific knowledge. We saw how that can happen and how that happens. Then we also must accept that it is profitable for the medical industry to push a reductionistic allopathic medicine without necessarily prioritizing the root cause of disease. This leads to a suboptimal or lack of solution for the patient. Now, so far, we have seen how the interests of the medical industry shapes science and also medicine. There is an additional player to take into consideration, which is the regulatory industry. I have added the two examples here, two agencies. One is the FDA, the American FDA, and one is Swissmedic, because I am Swiss. This is a Swiss agency active in Switzerland. Now, we have previously shown how these agencies that actually want safe medicine are responsible, or let's say are the main reason why medicine requires 12 to 15 years, and also 5 to 500 to 1700 million US dollars to reach the patient. So from initial research to market, it takes 12 to 15 years and 500 to 1700 million US dollars. Now, of course, this is a huge barrier for new companies, but it's also a very long time for patients to wait for a drug. And also we see how not only does the drug reach the patient after 12 to 15 years, but the science reaches the practitioner with the same speed as it is linked to the tool that the practitioner has, which is the drug most of the time. Now, in summary, regulatory agencies want safe medicine. Then the prohibitive costs of clinical trials make it almost impossible for new companies to enter the market. Then there's a huge gap of 12 to 15 years between research and its application in practice. And then patents are the only way to support these high costs, and only extra natural substances can be patented. Now, after discussing how the medical industry interacts with the research and development and influences scientific knowledge, I want to add a word about the general population and R&D and medical R&D, which is about a misconception I observe almost everywhere I go. Now, I think people believe that scientists and medical, or I have the impression that the general population, and I believe that scientists and medical practitioners understand the human body, that we understand human body, like we understand a piece of technology, like we understand, we create cars, we create planes, we create phones, we can go to the moon, that we also assume that we understand the human body. This couldn't be further away from the truth. This is false. The reality is that we haven't figured out the human body. Yeah, it is true that we understand 100% of what we build, yes, but we did not build ourselves. We are a product of nature, and so we are a product of nature. We do not create nature, so we will always be behind it. Now, I think it's okay to believe that we are the smartest animal. That is correct, but it's not okay to think we are smarter than nature. And this is not the case, as we see with the human body. Now, evidence for this is, of course, as clear as the sun. Chronic incurable diseases. These are called idiopathic, which means that medicine says we do not know what causes these, what the cause is. If we knew, we would be able to prevent or find a cure. Then that a considerable portion of drugs are discovered randomly. This is also a hint, it's not an evidence. And also that there is a large number of contradicting studies. So how can we have understood the human body with these three pieces of evidence? Now, overall, what are today's conclusions? I think these are the facts that everyone must accept. First of all, the medical industry is the sole creator of medicine as it is the sole player in the development step. Then we must accept that eliminating disease is counterproductive for the medical industry. We must accept that the direction and quality of scientific knowledge is skewed by the industry. Then that the gap between research and its application is huge in medicine compared to other industries. That modern allopathic medicine is inconvenient for the patient and convenient for the industry. And last, we might have figured out how to get to the moon or speak with a relative on the other side of the world, but we haven't figured out how our body works. And that's okay. We are a product of nature, not its creator. Now, and here is a conclusive illustration. I'm showing an example for the pharmaceutical industry. We have on top the market that sets an entry cost of $1 billion to a drug producer. In the situation, the drug producer will have to create a pill that makes huge profits, of course. They cannot afford to cure disease. They will not earn enough money, of course, or at least they will earn a lot less. As because if they will cure the disease, it will put them out of business. So of course the patient is the victim of the system. He is stuck in a state of chronic disease with or without a drug. And when there is a drug available, it will be extranatural in an extranatural drug because it's the only drugs that can be patented and brought to market. And what happens when or what can happen when we use extranatural compounds, when we start to abuse nature, because we use something that is not nature, we risk to do more harm than good if we consider the total of its effects. So this was it. I hope you learned a few things. In the next episode, I will discuss the flaws in medical practice, so the next step in the process, and how they potentially play a role in medicine being so ineffective. So I hope to see you there. Thank you for watching.